All right, this is going to be our first video on solving one-step equations. Today we're going to just be adding and subtracting. So first let's take a look at our vocabulary words. The two of them are just properties that are going to be helpful to understand what we're doing. So the addition property of equality, the property states that if you add the same number to both sides of the equation, the new equation will have the same value, which is the inverse operation. Okay, so if we use the inverse operation, they undo each other. Okay, so for example, adding and subtraction are inverts of each other, and therefore multiplying and dividing are inverts of each other. Okay, the other property is the subtraction property of equality, which again is very similar to the addition property of equality, but this says if you subtract the same number from both sides of the equation, your new equation will still have the same value. So we will talk about those and we will use those today in this video. All right, sliding over down to the goals. So you have one main goal when you are solving an equation. There's one thing you're trying to do, and that is to isolate the variable. Okay, isolating that variable is our goal, which in essence means we're trying to get the variable by itself. If the variable is by itself, then we can find its value. So variable by itself, to learn the value, how much is that variable worth? So to learn the value of the variable. Okay, so if it says x equals 10, that is the value of that variable. So we are going to isolate the variable by using the inverse operation. It's all so much fun. Okay, so the examples of inverse operation are listed here below. So these are examples of using the inverse operation. To solve a subtraction problem, you add. To solve an addition equation, you subtract. Okay, so those are your examples of inverse operations. Sorry, I'm not very good with this fancy pen. Okay. Oh, and what makes equations so exciting is that you can check your solution. Okay, so you can check each and every answer by replacing the variable with your solution. Okay, so you are going to check all your answers with substitution. And we've practiced substitution in our bell work, so substitution. All right, so that is how you can check and get 100% on all your equations that you solve for us. All right, let's get started with example 1. All right, we're going to start out with small whole numbers, nothing too crazy. Okay, down here on example 1, I have n plus 17 equals 98. Okay, I like to circle my variable. Okay, if I circle my variable, I know what I'm trying to solve for. Okay, I want to isolate that n. Okay, I'm going to do that by using the inverse operation. All right, so if I want to zero out this 17, I want to move those away from my variable, I'm going to do my inverse operation. I'm going to subtract. So I'm going to subtract 17 from this side, and 17 minus 17 is 0. Okay, so they undo each other, and now the only thing I have on the left side of my equation is a variable. Okay, but to keep this teeter-totter balanced, to keep this equation balanced, if I do something on the left side of my equation, I have to do the exact same thing to the right side of my equation. Okay, so think of a teeter-totter or balancing beam. If I take off 17 little people off of one side, I have to take 17 people off of the other. So we're going to go ahead and subtract 1 and 8. All right, so my solution, fancy math word, solution is 81. And remember how we can get 100% is to check our solution. So 81 plus 17, what does that equal? hopefully it equals 98, and that means we got it correct. Okay, down here with example 2, we're spicing up our life a little bit. We have decimals and we have a negative, so we have decimals and integers, but the process is exactly the same. We're going to isolate our variable, our x, so I'm going to circle that bad boy so I know what I'm trying to get alone. And to do that, I'm going to use my inverse operation. So what is the opposite of subtraction? It is to add. So we're going to, oops, sorry about that crazy 5. We're going to add the 5 and 2/10, because if I had a negative 5 and 2/10 and I add 5 and 2/10, we get 0. And remember, if we get that to be 0, then x is all by itself, which is what we wanted. And remember that balancing beam, if I add 5 and 2/10 to one side, that is what we're going to do to the other side. So add 5 and 2/10 to the right side. Whatever I do over there, I have to do over here. Now we're looking at an integer problem because I have a negative plus a positive. So if you remember, same sign, add and keep, different sign, subtract. Keep the sign of the higher number, then you'll be exact. Okay, so different signs, we're going to subtract. So we have 7.3 minus 5.2. And notice I'm doing this off to the side so I don't clutter up my beautiful workspace. So if I subtract, I get a 1, decimal, and a 2. And keep the sign of the higher number means it's a negative 2 1/10. Okay, so this here is what we call our solution. We found the value of our variable. And like a good student that we are, we're going to check our solution. So negative 2 1/10 minus 5.2. 5 and 2/10. So here I have a negative minus, keep, change, change, and now we have a negative plus a negative, and that same sign, add and keep, so we're going to add, and looky here, we ended up with a negative 7 3/10. So we have the right solution. Good work. Okay, turning the page to example 3, we're going to do one more problem together, and this one, eek, it has fractions, but that's okay, we're not scared of fractions. Alright, so looking at here, I have a variable of y this time, and I circle it because I want to know that I'm going to isolate that variable. So we have subtraction here, so the inverse is to add 3/4. Okay, so if I have a negative 3/4 plus a 3/4, we get 0 there. So all that's left on the left side of our equation is our variable y. So moving over to the right side of our equation, remember, got to do the same thing over here. I'm going to squeeze in a plus 3/4. Okay, now dealing with the fraction part first, I need to find a common denominator. So notice I have a 20 on this side, so I like the 9/20. So I'm just going to change my 3/4 so it has the common denominator of 20. So 5 times 4 is 20, so that's what I'm going to do to the 3 as well. So now, it's kind of scrunched together, I don't like that, but I have negative 9/20 plus 15/20. So remember, same signs, add and keep, different signs, subtract. So in my head, I'm thinking negative 9 plus 15. Right? And since the signs are different, we subtract, and 15 minus 9 is a positive 6. So our numerator is a positive 6, and our denominator is 20. We reduce that by dividing by 2. Divide by 2, and our reduced fraction is 3/10. Okay, so our solution to our equation, y equals 3/10. Just like that. All right, so let's, we're not going to do this. So checking our solution, we have 3/10 minus 3/4. Common denominator, again, would be 20 times 5 times 5 times 2. Had to think there. And then 6 minus 15, in fact, is a -9. So we get the -9/20. Good work.